Has obenya be a man netomana. Obe download, and the obey ya. And the end the fancy difficult I face here network no. They are in my
because it's a huge electronic platform, we have scammers there as well. So we try as much as possible to protect our customers. For instance, if the person has to receive the product gets there. My dispatch waits. I confirm that I've received the money. Leave the item. We normally will not send the money before. So there are certain things that should alert you that perhaps you are being scammed. So apart from that,
the charges associated with it, I think that should be looked into. And now with this emergence of this e-levy, to me, in as much as I do like and appreciate the e-services, the fear is that it might also discourage people from using it. For that one, it's a fact because, when payments are being made, the receiver obviously will tell the sender to add those charges to it. I'm not sure that the receiver will appreciate, taking that cost upon himself. So that is a challenge.
Here say Sraban say we say we say so to for more thing. It's nima no ya tutum. Nima no boy den. Ese bo ha obi to betima betena se ya nto hwe ma. No asoro kofi. It's Sraban say tax ni nima na ho. O hwe asomai. Ene petrol ni nima o hwe asomai. Se ne enso ba obi betimi kaka na obi betimi ato amaye.
But looking at the broader sense, I think it's also, as they are saying, that it also help us to develop a bit faster. Maybe we have to wait and probably know where we can draw the line as to probably reducing the margin slightly so that at least it can embrace majority of the people. Though I know there are some quotations as to people who are cut off the project, but I think by and large it's a good thing.
MTN for some bet me a boy padia and can feel say network na enye wabo so can say be on besi bibi wa ham say bet me my network no ejina so my abuso can me feel say nke be boy pa serious.
I think that maybe the telcos and other let's say facilitators should also educate the masses, the general public, so that at least if we all get ourselves involved in it, the rate at which our money, handling of our money, the money gets so dirty, and at times it's even becomes so displeasant when we're even receiving very dirty money from some people. So if all these things can be factored in by educating people to the use of the e-services, I think it will be good.
If you say you live in there, because or might be as a watch it mine say tax on to your tax or mine because even though you're too kind that but you share TV, you share films, you share said you for my sort. Oh, and to me feel saying I know you live in it there. Minu ano momonye ntu nanka embra nanka emfa nchire o mine no. I say basusu a I see a share nipa na obeye ho adwuma no the mom de bedi say ye be koso yie omode be ye adwuma matima mu fo ne so yenya ho mfaso na nkwa se nipa ba ko mienu bi na ekwa konya ho mfaso ho na ye problem pa na nka me de nka 11 de ade a megitum pa.
Ghana's economy is increasingly becoming digital, with more businesses taking advantage of technology to reach more customers and to serve them better. Backed by a burgeoning fintech ecosystem, new opportunities are emerging by the day. With the trend comes the challenges. Ahead of the graphic business Stanbic Bank Breakfast Forum on electronic services and economic growth, we sampled the views of the public on how e-services are impacting their lives.
e-services, as we all know, is a very laudable thing where payments can be made instantly, and then it's also faster. Besides that, payments made convenient where probably I can sit in my comfort area and make payments. There's also this easy way of doing it. I must say that it's quite okay. Confirming payments made can easily be made on phones and other things. Previously, one has to call the bank or go to the bank to find out whether such deposit has been made. But with the e-services or with the electronic payments, I think it's okay.
The e-services in general, they have been of a huge benefit to us, because in this market, for instance, the Abosokan market here, we used to have some challenges. We have some middlemen here who make it sometimes difficult for us shop owners to reach customers directly. They meet the customer and they say all sorts of things. So the electronic platform gave us another way to reach the customers ourselves. So for instance, through Facebook advertising, through WhatsApp, business and others, we reach the customers as they contact us, and then through dispatch we serve them and they pay us through mobile money.
Eboa me kire say scanner first no kura akomfort meji say so de wodi two phone so a omuntu meji u phone yira kura no kwa mtie na wo sabe kan osika eti se da so a ne ba bia wonam bia wo nya say so wo yi de to ade no wutimi de eyi e de to ade ehia.
Maybe personal transfers, you're working from here to it saves time, and it helps you not to stress yourself too much. You just send it through your phone and then you help yourself.
The e-service is good though, because some of our customers are not here. We tend to send the goods to them, then they Momo it to us. So in order to be safe about how we are going to transact, so the e-service has come to help really much, because we get the money straight on our phone, then we give the goods to the delivery. So the transaction has become very easy comparing to the cash transactions, because some of the cash transactions, some of us, we don't trust. It's not that we don't trust, but the people we send to deliver goods, we don't know them. So if we transact with the customer pays us the money like Momo, then we send the goods through them. So the e-transaction is very good.
E-services, electronic system, they feel say eboa my business no ekoso. Bibi ti say kametua duty kura na wo say kamefa car ekotema no makwa ko hu agent makwa kotua be me feel say e-services ne dey oye ya pa sisi ya no watua me frɛ na bisa no nsaka wo sen ana me nsaka ka afro bia emem me feel say no mo eboa a business na my business no ekoso.
It saves time. Sometimes you have the mechanics, maybe they are working on the car, they need a part, and coming back and forth becomes an issue. We call for the part, sometimes we send pictures through whatever device. We're able to tell the actual thing the person needs. We send it via dispatch. Payment is done. No time wasting. So it's been good.
There should be education, more education on how to use it, because at this side of the market, let's say that we still can here, it's not everybody who can do e-transactions. You see, so if the education is more on how to transact with the Momo, I think it will be very good. For me, I'm down with it. I like e-transaction because the cash system was weighing us down. Too much cash in your pocket and all that, but then now I get to have everything that I want on my phone. This is better.
Currently, we get to pay our tax and everything via the bank, which is good. It's simpler and faster. You have no excuse if you don't go and pay. So it's been good.
Boa also ngita scan cash on the phone so. We bought number na mana otimi send them na makoyi.
Currently, the challenge that is hanging around is this e-levy issue. So some of the mechanics and electricians can say, Madam, omo de ba mo money ebejayo, adu we de omo de ba mo money ebejayo. I think they should find a way around it. If it is too high, they should do something about it. And because when you think about the whole thing, I understand them in a way because we work with them. And one of my friends was saying that, Brenda, I pay with Momo. If I have to pay 5,000 cedis with my workers, I need extra 200 cedis to be able to do that. Not to talk of they too going to pick their cash. So they should find a way about it.
Bo how be your network no. Entimi emme yi. Omo anaba. Omo network ni timi tiko.
The main one has to be network problems. You know, at times, especially those of us who normally do the international transfers, you know, yeah, there are times that you encounter such problems. And even with the local transfer, to either you are pushing money into your account locally or probably you are kind of withdrawing, you could encounter such problems.
At times, so be a network non at times, and even though yen aboso can have the network in the network in there very bad. Even though so be cross and there amount say be a no padewi na resobenya be a man netomana obe download and the obe ya and the fancy difficult I face here network no they are in so my
Because it's a huge electronic platform, we have scammers there as well. So we try as much as possible to protect our customers. For instance, if the person has to receive the product gets there, my dispatch waits, I confirm that I've received the money. Leave the item. We normally will not send the money before. So there are certain things that should alert you that perhaps you are being scammed. So apart from that,
the charges associated with it, I think that should be looked into. And now with this emergence of this e-levy, to me, in as much as I do like and appreciate the e-services, the fear is that it might also discourage people from using it. For that one, it's a fact because, you know, when payments are being made, the receiver obviously will tell the sender to add those charges to it. I'm not sure that the receiver will appreciate, you know, taking that cost upon himself. So that is a challenge.
Here say Sraban say we say we say so to for more den. It's nima no so ya tutum. Nima no boy den. Ese bo ha obi betima betran say ye ntoshe ma. No asoro kofi. It's Sraban say tax ni nima na wo ho. Ohwan asomai ene petrol ni nima ohwan asomai se ne enso ba obetimi kaka na obetimi ato amaye yeso enye bi dia hweye.
But looking at the broader sense, I think it's also, as they are saying, that it also help us to develop a bit faster. Maybe we have to wait and probably know where we can draw the line as to probably reducing the margin slightly so that at least it can embrace majority of the people. Though I know there are some quotations as to people who are cut off the project, but I think by and large it's a good thing.
MTN for some bet me a boy pardia and can feel send network na enye wabo so can say be on besi bibi wa ham say bet me my network no ejina so my abuso can me feel send kebe boy pa serious.
I think that maybe the telcos and other let's say facilitators should also educate the masses, the general public, so that at least if we all get ourselves involved in it, the rates at which our money, handling of our money, the money gets so dirty, and at times it's even becomes so displeasant when we're even receiving very dirty money from some people. So if all these things can be factored in by educating people to the use of the e-services, I think it will be good.
If you say you live in there, because for my BS, I want to throw mine say tax. Untitled Tax or minor encos. Even though you're too kind that by your TV, your films, your said you conform my sort. Oh, and to me feel saying, I know you live in it. Come, many moment to Nanka, Nanka, and Fancy or minor. I say, Basusua, I was here, share Nipana, obey a word man, the mom de biddy. Say, yeah, Becosu ye, or the bay of Juma Matimum for your senior home fast row. Then question Nipa Bakum Yunubi, and a Quacunya home fast row, one year, your problem pa, and coming and Kai live in it. I damn a jitum pa.
Amid a storm of protests from the Gold Coast nationalists who feared that a newspaper company owned by a British national would frustrate their fight for independence from Britain, Graphic Communications Group Limited, or GCGL, was established as a private business in 1950 by the Daily Mirror Group of Britain. At that time, the company was named the West African Graphic Company Limited. Cecil Hamsworth King Jr., who was in charge of the Daily Mirror's Group West African operations, was the founder chief executive of the company. Company appointed Martin Thurston Kofi, a Ghanaian, as the first editor of the Daily Graphic and later the Sunday Mirror, which is now the Mirror.
When the Graphic newspaper was established in the Gold Coast in 1950, there were numerous newspapers in the country already, but these many newspapers were mostly newspapers run by the nationalists who were fighting for independence at the time. So these newspapers tended to be more agitational, more adversarial, and more propagandistic. When the Graphic entered on 2nd October 1950, it introduced a more modern, professional journalism.
By 12 o'clock on that day, all the 2,000 copies of the newspaper sent to the newsstands had been bought. The Daily Graphic had become an instant must-read and set itself apart from its competitors. It has never looked back. 3 years later, on August 2nd, 1953, the company published its...
And an interesting conversation this morning on the integration of e-service into our economy, the implications for economic growth and the quality of life. And very soon, we will be going to the hall for the start of this conversation. But here with me now is the head of FinTech and Innovation at the Bank of Ghana, Kwame Opong, also Eric Amponsa-Boateng, who is a tax consultant with PKF, a tax consult. My name is Darryl Kwao. Great to be with you this morning. We don't want to waste much time. We want to delve straight into the conversation about the integration of e-services into our economy and what impact it will have on economic growth and the quality of life. And I want to start with you, Mr. Boateng, because we want to let our audience know why it is critical we have this conversation about the integration of e-services. What do you think?
Good morning to you, viewers and listeners. I think that we need this conversation because for the past few years, I find that most people are engaged in that kind of activity. What I mean is services. And if you look at our tax laws, Section 3(1), it tells you which types of incomes are to be subjected to tax. Okay, we have employment income, business income, and then investment income. And so if somebody is rendering a service, I think that that person has to be brought into the tax net, because like you've mentioned earlier on, we want the economy to grow. And I think that it's important that everybody who is engaged in any form of activity should be brought in. So that is what I would say.
All right. And when we hear about e-something, the first thing that comes to mind is the e-levy, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But I want to come to you, Mr. Opong, because you're here. The central bank is here at this program, and so that means that you also play a crucial role when it comes to the integration of e-services. Tell me about, for instance, the Bank of Ghana and how you are moving along with the government's quest to digitalize our economy and integrate e-services.
Thank you very much. I think over the past 2 decades, I would say, Bank of Ghana has been proactively looking at the Ghanaian society and the economy, and clearly has its finger on the pulse as to where things are headed. And I think if you look at the journey, and we recently published an article on our website about the Ghanaian payment system and how it's evolved over the years, the policy interventions that have been introduced by Bank of Ghana clearly reflects the direction in which things are going. Started out with a 2003 Act, payments, subsequently introduced or established the Ghana Interbank Payments and Settlement Systems to bring some efficiency into the retail payment space. Then you also have the introduction of several policy measures, such as the branchless banking guidelines, to initially usher in the mobile money model, which was further iterated with the Electronic Money Issuers Guideline, and subsequently the Payment Systems and Services Act. When you look at the raft of policies and the direction, that tells you that there's an understanding of where things are going as a society, because this is not just unique to Ghana. This is a global trend, and consumers are voting with their feet. Consumers are increasingly preferring digital services over physical services and in-person services. The efficiencies that it brings to businesses, the enhancements that it brings to livelihoods, and the improvements that it brings to the overall economy is something that cannot be understated. From an investment standpoint, from a revenue mobilization standpoint, from a transparency standpoint, these are all things that are becoming evident in our society. So the question is, how do we enable that as regulators in the sector? And so there are several things we've been doing over the years, and all the activities, if you actually map it out, you see a clear direction and a clear understanding of where things are going. I think often what you realize is you can have, we have the opportunity to guide how things go, and sometimes you also have scenarios where society is moving in another direction, and so we have to be able to understand it, work with industry and all key stakeholders to ensure that we're putting in the right policy measures to safely guide that orderly development to achieve our ultimate goal, which is now ended up in discussions around our e-city that we're currently piloting.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that and how far you have come.
So, as announced by the governor in 2019, November, I think the foresight at the time was a bit interesting to many. But if you look at recent announcements, even by the US government, to immediately start exploring it, that tells you that Ghana was not on the wrong path. What we did as a society and what we did as a regulator and what we did as a central bank is to look at our circumstance, understand what our role is today and what it potentially would look like in future. Because if we have a role that involves making currency available to the economy, and the entire economy is moving digital, financial services are digitizing, banks, mobile money, payment service provision, e-commerce, even our own local traders are moving into social commerce. So I'm sure you've been getting WhatsApp blasts from your local supplier of some goods and services. How do we make sure we're providing the right form factor of cash potentially, to make it more efficient? And so these are some of the reasons. There are several reasons behind the financial inclusion, the opportunity for a more effective payment system. These are all things that are important to us. And for that reason, we thought we would take the cautious step in at least exploring it and understanding how this might work, how feasible this is in Ghana, and how we can situate it in this local context. So we're actually entering the final stage of that pilot.
Right. And
some consumers will get the opportunity to use that in the coming months. But the idea is we're moving with deliberate haste to understand what needs to happen and ensure that all the key risks are addressed before the central bank makes a decision as to where things go. So we recently published a white paper, which is intended to be a conversational document with our stakeholders, industry, academia, everyday citizens. Please take a look at that document. We've tried to make it as reader-friendly as possible, so you don't need to be a technical person to understand the concepts and the rationale and the vision behind it. and feel free to share your feedback with us in some of the channels that have been provided.
Okay. Well, speak of risks, I hope that we'll have some time to talk about the other virtual currencies, for instance, the cryptocurrency, which you issued a warning about just recently. But I want to come to you, Mr. Boateng, to tell us, the government has announced a series of programs in its quest to, push the e-integration agenda or the digitalization agenda. How do you assess our performance so far? And I want you to add how this is going to impact on our economy if the government is successful.
Okay. You realize that we have the Ghana.gov, the platform for which you can actually make the payment. And I would say it's the best that we can ever have. I'm saying so because if you look at GRE, last year, for example, in my opinion, they were able to exceed the target because of that. Because we know, for example, that hitherto there were certain payments that were made to individuals. Maybe you go to the GRA office, sometimes you're in a hurry, and then you leave your cash maybe with somebody to pay. Now, the payment platform is so easy. And once you are hooked up and you are on the portal, you can be able to file and then make the payment. So I think that, yes, I remember initially when it was brought on board, Jerry had a few challenges. It was because, in my opinion, they did not probably plan well. So if you remember, when they gave the directive that they couldn't pay with a check, okay, to any GRA office. GRA, some of the offices were still receiving the checks. And it was because of some of the challenges that we had. And myself, as a consultant, I had to engage the commissioner to the extent that even going on the platform, you log in with your tax identification number and you're supposed to get a code. You try it, you don't get a code. Okay, so I listed a few of the issues, and I think that it helped, and then some of them were actually resolved. As we even speak now, it's still not a perfect thing, but I think that it's all well and good. Because you see, if you go to the Registrar General's department, hitherto you had to probably go there and make the payment. Now you can even register your business online. You make the payment online. And that has helped in all of them being able to mobilize more revenue than we're having in the past. Now, you will even agree with me when we look at the road tolls. The road tolls. I'm one person, I remember about 2-3 years ago, I told them that it was a good thing. My challenge was that I didn't see the need why I should drive to a point, roll down my car, and give money to somebody and take a receipt. Most often than not, people just get the receipts and they drop them.
Yeah.
And you know what happens?
Yeah.
They pick them, you can easily print those ones. And so you realize that when the automation was done, I remember on the wager stretch,
right,
you will agree with me that the revenue was about 3 times. Okay, so it tells us that once we go digital,
it will be a boost for revenue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so far, I am very happy because now GRA has a unit that has been able to now track people who do business online. Hitherto, they were not able to do so. And I remember that anytime that we meet at our tax conferences, I was always raising these issues 10 years ago that transactions, GRA didn't have the capacity to track them. And so if you're not honest yourself and walk to the GRA office and say that, oh, I've registered this business, this is the income that I've made, so I'm coming to file even my returns, then it means that people are into business.
Well, speak of the GRA, I know next month they're going to start the e-commerce taxing social media businesses, which is also going to be good for revenue.
Yes.
But there's also this controversial one everybody is talking about, which is the e-levy, which has been very controversial in the last few months, and
Yes.
we don't know where it's headed. Your thoughts on whether or not it should be passed?
In my opinion, you see, I think that as a nation, all of us need to engage each other and ask ourselves. We are aware that Ghana has gone beyond 75% when you look at our debt to the GDP. So what does it mean? It means that we cannot go and borrow. So what are the options left? One option is that maybe we seek for grants. And you agree with me that because of the COVID, even those countries which were giving Ghana grants, they themselves, they're having issues. And if you say that you won't even go in for a loan, then you're going to pay back those loans with interest. And then there are also certain conditions that go with them. So, in my opinion, I think that the e-levy
It's a good tax.
It's a good thing. However, I think that we really need to look at it well. For example, the last time I spoke on Joy News, I mentioned it, that I do not understand why I'm in the formal sector. My brother is in the formal sector. Before his salary goes to the bank, he's paid his PAYE.
Okay.
Okay, so we looked at all that, but the point is that it is at least one reason why I'm all for it is that it is bringing in at least some people who are in the informal sector into the net.
Okay, sorry to cut you. I hear we have just 2 minutes. I want to hand it over to Mr. Opom because you talked about the risks. I know that recently you had to issue a warning about Freedom Coin. People still don't understand, especially the cryptocurrency enthusiasts, why this one is coming out. But, you know, e-integration also comes with risks, and these are some of the risks. Tell us about them.
Well, thank you very much. But let me make a first comment about what my colleague here said. I think everything you hear from the GRA perspective and what it's, you know, these digitization of government services and revenue mobilization has brought shows that this is a worthy pursuit. And while it may not be perfect, it's important that we stick to it. But let me also pivot a bit to the digital currency space. You know, when you look at the policy position that the Bank of Ghana has put out there, it's been one of cautiousness. Remember, we have a responsibility for protecting consumers as well. And often, some consumers may not actually know what they are getting involved in. Now, when you engage cryptocurrency experts and digital currency experts and virtual assets experts, they can have a whole breadth of possibilities in their minds, and they clearly understand the risk they're dealing with. But we, and you know, from a central bank, as a regulator, with the responsibility for protecting the businesses in the industry, for ensuring stability, and for ensuring protection for consumers, it's important that we at least let consumers know at any point in time, and this is something it's been in place since 2018.
Right.
What we regulate and what we do not regulate. There are risks associated. I think you're all aware that even the European Union recently raised some risks.
Got 30
some
seconds.
Issues. Yes, they recently raised some issues around the risk with cryptocurrency. Yes, certain things come to risk, just like you would have with nuclear energy, but you have to make a decision. Are you able to address the risk enough in order to make a decision as to how you address it from a policy standpoint? So there's a balance there. And until that balance is achieved, protection and safety is the most important position to take.
Thank you so much, Kwame Opong, Head of FinTech and Innovation at the Bank of Ghana. Also, Eric Amponsah-Boateng, Tax Consultant with PKF Consult. We just scratched the surface of the conversation, as you can imagine. And so we will be right back with the start of the Graphic Business Stanbic Bank Breakfast Meeting. Again, the topic for this morning, integration of e-services into our economy, implications for economic growth and quality of life. That conversation will start right after these commercials, moderated by my colleague Winston Amma. Stay tuned.
Access to your news at any time and anywhere. Graphic Communication is giving you the opportunity to have news not only in hard copy but also in a digital form. Yes, you can have access to news at all times and even before they reach the newsstands. Simply download the Graphic News Plus from Google Play Store on your Android and App Store on your iOS device and get your digital news from your favorite daily graphic, Graphic Business, The Mirror, Graphic Showbiz, Junior Graphic, and Graphic Sports. Download your Graphic News Plus now and choose your preferred package daily, weekly, monthly, and annually, and access free news on various interest areas as well. Visit us on graphic.com.gh for further information. Graphic News Plus.
Ghana's economy is increasingly becoming digital, with more businesses taking advantage of technology to reach more customers and to serve them better. Backed by a burgeoning fintech ecosystem, new opportunities are emerging by the day. With the trend comes the challenges. Ahead of the Graphic Business Stanbic Bank Breakfast Forum on electronic services and economic growth, we sampled the views of the public on how e-services are impacting their lives.
E-services, as we all know, is a very laudable thing where payments can be made instantly, and then it's also faster. Besides that, payments made convenient where probably I can sit in my comfort area and make payments. There's also this easy way of doing it. I must say that it's quite okay. Confirming payments made can easily be made on phones and other things. Previously, one has to call the bank or go to the bank to find out whether such deposit has been made. But with the e-services or with the electronic payments, I think it's okay.
The e-services in general, they have been of a huge benefit to us because in this market, for instance, the Abosokan market here, we used to have some challenges. We have some middlemen here who make it sometimes difficult for us shop owners to reach customers directly. They meet the customer and they say all sorts of things. So the electronic platform gave us another way to reach the customers ourselves. So, for instance, through Facebook advertising, through WhatsApp, business, and others, we reach the customers as they contact us, and then through dispatch, we serve them and they pay us through mobile money.
Scanner first no kura a comfort meji. Say so the only two phones wa omuntu meji. U phone yira kura no kwa MTN na. U sabeka usika. It is said that so ne baby a wonam bia wo nya say so wo yi de to ade no. Wutimi de eyi e de to ade nya.
Maybe opesa transfers ka. You are working from here to it saves time. And it helps you not to stress yourself too much. You just send it through your phone and then you help yourself.
E-service is good though because some of our customers are not here. We tend to send the goods to them, then they momo it to us. So in order to be safe about how we are going to transact, so the e-service has come to help really much because we get the money straight on our phone, then we give the goods to the delivery. So the transaction has become very easy comparing to the cash transactions. Because some of the cash transactions, some of us, we don't trust. It's not that we don't trust, but the people we send to deliver goods, we don't know them. So if we transact with the customer pays us the money like Momo, then we send the goods through them. So the e-transaction is very good.
E-services, electronic system, if you say a bois, my business, no, a coso. Bibi ti say kametua duty kura na wo say kamefa ka ekotema no makwa ko hu agent na akwa kotua ba me feel say these services ne dey wo ye ya pa sisi ya no watua me frɛ na bisa no nsaka wo sen ana me nsaka ka afro bia emem me feel say no mo re boa a business na my business no ekoso.
It saves time. Sometimes you have the mechanics maybe they are working on the car, they need a part, and coming back and forth becomes an issue. We call for the parts, sometimes you send pictures through whatever device, we're able to tell the actual thing the person needs. We send it via dispatch. Payment is done. No time wasting. So it's been good.
There should be education, more education on how to use it, because this at this side of the market, let's say that we so can here, it's not everybody who can do e-transactions. You see, so if the education is more on how to transact with the Momo, I think it will be very good. For me, I'm down with it. I like e-transaction because the cash system was weighing us down. Too much cash in your pocket and all that. But then now I get to have everything that I want on my phone. This is better.
Currently, we get to pay our tax and everything via the bank, which is good. It's simpler and faster. You have no excuse if you don't go and pay. So it's been good.
Boha also get scan cash on the phone. So we bought number the man with me send them na makoyi.
Currently, the challenge that is hanging around is this e-levy issue. So some of the mechanics and electricians can say, Madam, omo de ba mo money ebe jayo. I do the omo de ba mo money ebe jayo. I think they should find a way around it. If it is too high, they should do something about it. And because when you think about the whole thing, I understand them in a way because we work with them. And one of my friends was saying that, Brenda, I pay with Momo. If I have to pay 5,000 cedis with my workers, I need extra 200 cedis to be able to do that. Not to talk of they too going to pick their cash. So they should find a way about it.
Boha obey network no. Intimi emeyi. Omo anaba. Omo network netimi tiko.
The main one has to be network problems. You know, at times, especially those of us who normally do the international transfers, you know, yeah, there are times that you encounter such problems. And even with the local transfer, to either you are pushing money into your account locally or probably you are kind of withdrawing, you could encounter such problems.
At times, so be a network non at times, and even though yen aboso can have the network in the the network in there very bad. Even though so be cross and there amount say be a no padewi na so be nya be a man netomana obe download and the obe ya and the we find say difficult I face here network no they are nyina so ye my.
Because it's a huge electronic platform, we have scammers there as well. So we try as much as possible to protect our customers. For instance, if the person has to receive the product gets there, my dispatch waits, I confirm that I've received the money, leave the item. We normally will not send the money before, so there are certain things that should alert you that perhaps you are being scammed. So apart from that,
the charges associated with it, I think that should be looked into. And now with this emergence of this e-levy, to me, in as much as I do like and appreciate the e-services, the fear is that it might also discourage people from using it. For that one, it's a fact because, you know, when payments are being made, the receiver obviously will tell the sender to add those charges to it. I'm not sure that the receiver will appreciate, you know, taking that cost upon himself. So that is a challenge.
Here say Sraban say we are saying we say it's so tough for my thing. It's nimano usuya tum. Nimano boy thing. Ese bo ha obi to betima betrans ya yen to hwe ma. No asoro kofi. It's Sraban say tax ni nimana wo.
Themed integration of e-service into our economy, implications for economic growth and the quality of life. And the theme, very instructive. We're looking at, you know, economic growth, but also looking at the quality of life. So not just our economic growth, but we're looking at the convenience that e-service will provide for you, businesses, and the general public. And today we've broken it down into 3 sub-themes. First of all, be unpacking e-service solutions and its contributions to the quality of life, as well as also understanding the creative revenue generation opportunities of e-service and solutions to economic growth, as well as understanding the impact of e-service on our economic growth and businesses. My name is Winston Amwa, and I'll be moderating this event. We would start with a prayer by Yvonne Ayi of the Graphic Communications Group.
Good morning. Shall we pray? Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for a beautiful morning like this. We also thank you for the gift of life. Father, we are also grateful for your grace and mercies upon our lives. This morning, as we gather here to deliberate on issues concerning our dear nation, Ghana, we ask that you grant us wisdom, support, and understanding as we go through the discussion to the very end. This and many other things we ask in the mighty name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Yvonne Ayi, for the opening prayer. Would now, with a round of applause, invite the MD of Graphic Communications Group Limited, Atuafo, to give us the welcome address.
Our chairman, Aduma Owusu of Visa International, the representative of the chief executive of Stanbic Bank Ghana, Samauku Aferjinu, the editor, graphic business, our expert panelists, distinguished participants, ladies, gentlemen, our audience member networks across our digital and media partners. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the first edition of the Graphic Business Stanbic Bank Breakfast Meeting in 2022. The breakfast meeting is a platform for discussing critical and relevant topics that have the potential to contribute to the economic, social growth and development of our country. As it is meet, today's mission is themed on the topic integration of e-service into our economy, implications for economic growth and quality of life. Distinguished participants, digitalization is rapidly becoming the new way of engaging globally. As the world is fast becoming more dependent on the internet, digital technology, and the user experience on mobile. The offshoot of this phenomenon is that services and commerce are also becoming tech and mobile based. E-tail is making a shift in retail. Ghana, like many other countries, has responded by making significant shifts in integrating e-service into our economy. The implications of this shift for the economy, therefore, will continue to be foregrounded for examination. Chairman, though the experts are here, I would entreat your indulgence to make 3 basic points. First, e-service offers a big global market with huge commercial value. According to the UNCTAD report titled Estimates of Global E-Commerce 2019 and Preliminary Assessment of COVID-19 Impact on Online Retail in 2020, published on the 3rd of May 2021, global e-commerce stood at a total value of $26.7 trillion US dollars in 2019. This was up by 4% over the 2018 figures, and this represents 30% of global GDP. Out of this figure, cross-border business to consumer e-commerce was 440 billion, a 9% increase over 2018 values. Additionally, there was 1.48 billion online shoppers worldwide, with 360 million shopping across borders. This marketplace obviously gives local Ghanaian traders the potential to tap global markets without necessarily staging a physical presence abroad. And thanks to the African Union, AfCFTA is here. This is good for the economy in terms of potential wealth creation. However, we have to plan and be nimble in seizing these opportunities across categories. Secondly, e-service has implications for the economy in terms of its potential for job creation. E-service relies on ICT tools as digitalization is the bedrock of e-service. As a consequence, ICT professionals would have expanded job options, and ICT-related businesses have a potential to expand their services in terms of offering. In his article, The Intricacies, Impact and Opportunities of E-commerce for Trade and Development, published on June 22, 2020, Mukesi Kitui, the immediate past Secretary General of UNCTAD, said e-commerce impacted on the export of ICT to the amount of 2 trillion in 2017, while the export of ICT services amounted to 568 billion in the same year. The 2017 figure is important as it points to the growth in the sector. The 2020 UNCTAD figures for export of ICT goods totaled 2.3 billion US dollars. Again, Ghana has the opportunity for creating an enabling ecosystem to attract the co-location and siting of manufacturers of ICT goods here, so we can benefit from the tax and export revenues for our well-being. Thirdly, there's the issue or the subject of tackling the endemic of corruption. It has been noted that e-service in the form of e-government has proven to have a positive impact on the fight to curb corruption, as it improves transparency, reduces middlemen in transactions as well. Researchers Ramshed Mistry and Abu Jalal confirmed this in their research titled The Impact of E-Government on Corruption, with the finding that as the use of ICT-related e-government increases, corruption decreases. And that, I believe, is a function of systems improvement, real-time reporting, monitoring, and application of controls, amongst others. If e-government can minimize corruption, the country can make savings for development with a resultant positive impact on the living standards of the people. Distinguished participants, our Honorable Chairman, I am confident our category active panelists that we have assembled this morning will lead us in remarkable discourse to enable us tap these opportunities for growth in Ghana and ultimately across the African Continental Free Trade Agreement area. I wish you an engaging and enlightening discussion. Once again, I welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Atuafu, who in welcoming us has also set the tone for the conversation. And why not? In these times, as a country, we'll be particularly interested in revenue generation. And even as we talk about the need to cut down on expenditure and block all the wastages in the system, e-governance would help us in curbing corruption. So it's a very important conversation this morning. And as we continue, would invite the representative of the CEO of Stanbic Bank, who is the head of brands and marketing, Mauku Afajinu, to give us some remarks. Let's welcome him with a round of applause.
A very good morning. Good morning. It's breakfast time. Good morning. I bring you greetings from the Chief Executive, Madam Chairperson, and he extends his warmest felicitations to everybody here. Definitely would want to be here and is with us, even though he has other commitments at the moment. The reason why this platform is a very important one, and one that we continue to support, is the opportunity it provides for us to deeply reflect on matters of important national interest in a very incisive, intellectual, stimulating way. And we are glad for the opportunity to be here today to be talking about this very important subject. The truth of the matter is that we all know our world has changed. We did hear about the fourth industrial revolution. It sounded rather far-fetched. And as they say, and COVID happened. That accelerator changed the entire narrative. Instead of a gradual transformation, we got a seismic change, and we are where we are today. Now, the statistics are very clear about what's happening in our world, the entire world. And we know that whatever happens in Ukraine affects our pockets in Ghana. Now, what's happening in the world is that digital transformation has impacted hugely on the digital economy, to the extent that currently, one of the biggest drivers of transformation in every economy is what happens in the digital space. And not only is it a driver, it's a major stimulant of the constantly evolving world we find ourselves in today. We therefore do not have much of an option when it comes to the adoption of digital technology. It's a choice we have to make in terms of how we apply ourselves to the opportunity that are created and how we leverage them in a way that will stimulate the economy in manners which will make us comfortable as a country. Because when the economy is good, we all feel good. When the economy is difficult, we all feel it directly. And that's why this conversation is important. Primarily because as a bank, we say Ghana is our home, we drive a growth. So everything that drives the economy of Ghana, and that translates into positive impact in the pockets of ordinary people, would be part of our core mandate as a bank. Now, if we come to look at digitalization, the service economy, we again see a certain straight line between what's happening and what pertains in our kind of environment. Because truth be told, over the past few years, our service sector has been growing significantly in leaps and bounds. I mean, currently, and the economists here will tell us, it's close to about 25% of our GDP, and it's likely to increase even further. But how do we make this work for us? That is where this conversation comes into play. Indeed, I am only John the Baptist and expected to set the tone. Even though I'm highly tempted, I'll leave the discussion to our distinguished panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mauku. I'm happy you didn't fall for that temptation. Don't come back.
Not to speak, to take my mic.
Okay, granted. Thank you very much, Mauku Afajinu, who's head of brands and marketing at Stanbic Bank. Well, time for us to introduce the chairperson for today's event. Atuaful in welcoming all of us. made reference to the chairperson, and that makes my work very easy. It means that you know who the chairperson is already. And so we'd invite the chairperson for today's event, who is a financial services professional with extensive payment and banking experience. She's currently country manager for Visa in Ghana. Let's welcome Adoma Pepra with a round of applause.
Good morning, everybody. Mr. Moderator, my name has changed. It's now Adoma Owusu. My husband will be very, very distraught if he said Pepra. Good morning, everybody. I want to say thank you to Ato and for the graphic and Stanbic for inviting me to be the chairperson of this very august gathering. It truly is an honor for me to be here today and to speak to you all about something that I'm very passionate about, which is around e-commerce. I'll start off by just sharing some observations that we at Visa have seen and observed around e-commerce, particularly on the continent, and then I'll hone in on some specifics about Ghana, and I'll conclude with some considerations in terms of what we need to do to accelerate e-commerce in Ghana. I think Ato set the scene very, very nicely when he made mention of the three elements shaping e-commerce here, on the globally. And we at Visa have observed something very, very similar. For the last 10 years, e-commerce has experienced phenomenal growth rates around the world. And even the recent setbacks as a result of the continuing COVID-19 pandemic hasn't stopped its rise. In fact, if anything, e-commerce sales are projected to rise to about $30 trillion across the globe by 2024. I know that in Ato's remarks, he made mention of the fact that currently, or in 2019, it was valued about $26 trillion. It's a huge market opportunity. Sub-Saharan Africa may be one of the globe's smallest e-commerce regions, but it shows huge growth potential. Leading markets such as South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, and Ghana are starting to mature, given an established foundation, and when twinned with the growing e-commerce penetration, offers payments, issuers, and acquirers new opportunities while helping to further accelerate the expansion of e-commerce in the region. In fact, Visa did some research over the last 20 months or so, 24 months, and we uncovered various key macroeconomic and demographic trends that will reinforce the growing digital adoption going forward. Now I'll run through a few of them. One of the things that we've seen is that while the COVID-19 crisis has contributed to acceleration of digital commerce in sub-Saharan Africa, the wider economic and demographic fundamentals are set to support continued e-commerce growth. In sub-Saharan Africa, the economy is projected to rebound by about 5.2% into 2022, and we're finding as well that household income levels are projected to increase and to rise to about $5,000 by 2025, which presents very, very huge potential from a household perspective. On top of that, there is great technological adoption, and with a young growing population, it will provide further impetus for the rise in opportunities of e-commerce in sub-Saharan Africa. The GSMA Intelligence, which is a mobile industry expert, projects that the number of mobile subscriptions in sub-Saharan Africa will more than double and reach 1 billion connections by 2024, up from the 477 million in 2019. So now this has various roles for various players within the payments ecosystem. So for issuers, acquirers, and merchants. And there are various things that one needs to consider, and I'll run through a couple of them. The important thing is that customers have to have seamless access through mobile channels when it comes to making digital payments on mobile devices. So what do these ecosystem players need to do? Number one, they need to ensure that there's a variety of payment channels available. Customers want options, and so a digital payments provider needs to respond with multi to omni-channel options. Omni-channel options. Secondly, make cross-border transactions seamless. E-commerce in the region is being driven by cross-border transactions. To make the most of this revenue opportunity, these transactions need to be enabled from the point of issuance to the point of acquiring. Thirdly, cater for local. While global cross-border merchants play a key role, local sub-Saharan African merchants are rising. And so there's an opportunity to support these players by not only providing digital payment support, but broader merchant value added services. Number 4, keep the customer at the center of the product design. Digital enables providers to personalize their products at scale. Making the most of this opportunity means that providers can create the best customer experience for the emerging digital savvy sub-Saharan African e-commerce customer. Fifthly, go virtual. Make sure that your cards have a strong e-commerce value proposition, but this opportunity can be taken further by going virtual. Point number 6, make sure that your payments infrastructure are adapted for goods and services. For goods and services. E-commerce in sub-Saharan Africa is not restricted to retail only, so the payments infrastructure should not be either. It needs to look at the wider scope of platform and digital and individual merchants enablement service provision. And I think the last point, and the very strong point, which I thought touched on as well, is that ensure that there's strong fraud protection controls and that they aren't impeding growth. So there's got to be the subtle difference in terms of the fraud control, but making sure that the customer user experience is also good. Now, let me shift by bringing this home to Ghana. So according to Statista, and it's a German company that specializes in market, consumer, and industry data in over 150 markets. Some of the stats that they have to have about Ghana is that e-com generated $638 million in 2021, and it's estimated to generate $1.3 billion in 2025. In 2022, it is estimated that e-commerce will go up by 19% to $759 million. The average revenue per user is $85 per person in this current year, and it's set to grow to $116 in 2025. Also, most e-com payments are done offline, and about 98% of that, and probably about 1.5% is done online. And this is largely due to trust issues. I was having a conversation with the panelists around this, but I'll elaborate on this a little bit later. And in terms of channel splits, most e-com happens on the desktop, about 60%, and 40% on the mobile. And this is really because phones are underpowered when compared to computers. There was an independent survey that was done around what customers perceive as problems when they're doing e-commerce and in Ghana, and how it impedes on service delivery. And there are about 4 points that I want to try and cover. The number one problem the customers complain about was customer service. And this has to do with the fact that people will call, businesses will not pick up, they will not return the calls, they will not respond to emails, and they don't send notifications. And also the agents are quite rude and very unhelpful. So that's the number one complaint around e-commerce service in Ghana. Secondly is around delivery. And some of the complaints are around the fact that the items are never delivered, the items are delivered late, the delivery personnel refuse to deliver the orders, and orders that are being marked as delivered when they haven't been. And also in a lot of cases, what people order and what they get are not the same. And the third complaint is really around product quality, where customers complain about wrong items being delivered, faulty items, low quality items, and outright fake products instead of the originals. But apart from the customer side, there are also businesses that are experiencing concerns around e-commerce. And the main challenge is the fact that Those who desire to cater towards international customers have issues with expensive international delivery costs and and difficulty in accepting international card payments. Also, the majority of e-com websites cater to Ghanaians. Most customers don't use the websites, and there are a couple of reasons. Most customers who find products they like online take the transaction offline via phone calls, direct messages, and WhatsApp. And also, they consider cash on delivery as a preferred payment method, so they skip the website altogether. And the main reason is because there's high level of fraud. People don't trust. There's trust issues in the whole ecosystem. And so what will happen is that you will start the process online and will be concluded offline, because people are saying that if the product they get is not the right product, how do I even get my money back? What are the chargeback issues that are faced? And also in some cases, there's so much back and forth that it's just really not worth the wahala, so people just don't bother. Similarly, a lot of company websites have no refund or return policies. And because of these trust issues, a lot of Ghanaians like to shop in a way that they have control over the experience, which is what I mentioned. So talk to somebody on the phone and then conclude that offline. But it's not all doom and gloom. I do believe that there's a lot that can be done around e-commerce in Ghana, and I just want to leave you with about 4 or 5 points for consideration in terms of the future of e-commerce here in Ghana. The majority of businesses out there are using WhatsApp, and it's actually a good way for people to consume or to conduct business. And additionally, with the introduction of the catalog feature, alongside with the payment options that are being debuted in the likes of Brazil and other countries, WhatsApp is increasingly becoming a functional platform for small businesses. We all know that the world has gone mobile, Ghana notwithstanding. And so more and more people are accessing the web via their mobile phones than they are their laptops or desktops. So what is happening is that most people are preferring those, and so what business needs to do is make sure that they render an experience that is very, very accessible over the mobile phone. And then lastly, an important consideration is that there's a need to accept international payments. And there are many institutions here in Ghana that can help small businesses be able to do so. And then lastly, and most importantly, where consumers go, the fraudsters also go. Okay, so we as Visa have seen a shift towards a lot of online fraud. And so what is important is that e-commerce sites need to make sure that they have robust cybersecurity and they have fraud detection tools that can assist with that. So despite all the hard work that needs to be done, e-commerce has seen explosive growth here in Ghana, accelerated by COVID. And I think in a post-COVID world, that growth will only continue to be exponential. But all of the various players within the ecosystem need to come together to be able to help to be able to achieve that. So with those few remarks, I would just like to thank you again for listening to me and for making me your chairperson today. I'm looking forward to what the panelists have to say, and I will look to wrap up in my closing remarks. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson Aduma Owusu. Well, so the stage is set now for us to begin the conversation on the integration of e-service into our economy, implications for economic growth and the quality of life. And today we've assembled 3 persons with expertise to help us deal with this particular matter or this particular theme of integrating e-service into our economy, its implications for economic growth and quality of life. We have Fred Frimpong, who is a strategist and executor, digital and financial services industry. Thank you very much, Fred, for joining us. Just give us a wave, we'll know who you are. We also have William Owusu Demitia, who is who's a lecturer at the University of Ghana Law School. Thank you very much, William, for joining us. And Francis Appiah is financial services and technology professional. So having introduced the panel, we're starting on a very important note. You know, we've talked about its contribution to the global economy, about 26 trillion. We've talked about having about 1.4 billion online shoppers and everything. We've talked about, you know, the income generated in Ghana in 2021, about $638 million when it comes to e-commerce and all. But also we've talked about the fact that e-service should ensure quality of life, even as we think about economic growth. So to start the conversation, we'll invite Fred Frimpong, who will be unpacking e-service solutions and telling us its contribution to the quality of life. And Fred, one of the things I want you to do is that in listening to Atoful in here, listening to our chairperson, listening to Malco, that point is made that the world has moved and now all of us must resort to e-service. Atu makes the point, for instance, that, well, one of the things that's going to help us do as a country is to help curb corruption. And if you are in Ghana this time, knowing very well what corruption does to the Ghanaian economy and how currently we're thinking about cutting down expenditure and ensuring that we do away with the wastages, that should be good news. But is it all about wonderful things we're saying about it? Is that what it will do for us? Should we be cautiously optimistic in what e-service can do for us? Let's, with a round of applause, welcome Fred Frimpong as he begins deliberations on this all-important conversation.
Thank you, Winston. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to jump right in. We've had from three speakers so far, and just to put some context in, I work in the payment industry, and so hearing the positive things that Atu was talking about, hearing what Adoma was talking about, the table that Adoma was shaking, I am stood very firmly on, and it's very shaky. I think when we talk about e-services and e-commerce and all the positive things that we think it could bring, we have to be careful that we don't look at only the long-term possibilities, all the rosy things that it could bring for us. Human beings are inherently optimistic, but also kind of resistant to change. So often what you find is that we think about the theoretical, it could change all of this. It could put us in the metaverse. We could be shopping for things in this virtual environment and everything is all fine. And then you hear Adoma speak, and whatever she's saying it's also true. For context, I work for Jumia, and I'm in charge of payment. And so what she talks about is real in the sense of the experiences that customers go through, right? Why they would prefer to pay offline, why they might start a process online and still go offline. And you see that in many of the other services that we tend to kind of try to digitalize. So you can apply for a passport digitally, but then you have to go to a bank to go and buy a form, right? Those kind of processes don't tend to give us the maximum that we could actually obtain from these services. So I'm glad that I'm not the only one that is, I feel like I'm going to be a bit of a Debbie Downer here, right? Where I'm not going to talk about all those, pie in the sky things that we could do with e-services, but also rather focus on the things that we can do in the relative short term, right? And I think in the long term, we know what you can achieve. But my economics teacher used to say that in the long run, we're all dead. And so it doesn't matter. So if we focus on what we can do in the relative short term, I think we can find out that it has to be deliberate. Whatever we do with e-services, how we can reap those benefits from it, it has to be very deliberate. Okay. For context, I think all the numbers that were shared, one thing that it wasn't maybe clear is that those e-commerce numbers relative to general commerce is under 10%. And if you look at it in terms of formal e-commerce, that's under 10% of all commerce. If you add those other channels, like the WhatsApp, the Instagram, people just calling somebody on the phone and buying things, it probably is not even up to 15%. So for context, we have a long way to go before we can reap those benefits for the economy and for the general population in terms of lifestyle improvement.
Well, I mean, since you talk about the short term, even though we all like long term, because we should also think about, the future generations as we put in place measures that they would come and benefit. In the short term, how do we make this convenient for the Ghanaian in improving his quality of life?
Okay. So I think Adoma made it fairly easy, raising a few points of what the average consumer, that is, well, I guess they're not even average anymore, because if I look at who's doing in e-commerce right now, it's not the average consumer that's doing it. It's the people that have access to the smartphones, people that have access to good internet, people whose areas you can deliver to. That's a relatively small subset of people. And so to make sure that the average person can benefit from it, we need to kind of take it further. I should be able to sit somewhere in, somewhere up in Western North, in a corner somewhere, order something, and be rest assured that I can pay remotely. I can have it delivered to me without the delivery agents calling me 10 times. And if they don't get hold of me, they take it back to a warehouse somewhere in another region that I have to go and pick it up. So we have to be very deliberate in making the systems which, by the way, we're putting a lot of systems in place now that we can benefit from in the near future. The address system that's been put in place, we have to start using it. I think we have to be very deliberate about using those things. If there's policies regarding refunds and items being sold in ways that customers don't like it, we should have some sort of consumer protection in the system. That works, right? If we're not deliberate about these efforts, then we will talk about the theoretical. And the theoretical is what we would see. We would look at global numbers and say, hey, look, this is really good. 30%, of global GDP is e-commerce. But then in Ghana, it's pretty small. So that's.
I like the fact that you say we need to be deliberate. I like the fact that you say we should begin to use our digital address system and everything. I like the fact that you talk about you talk about the situation where a lot of people would start the process online and conclude offline. And since you are into payments, in being deliberate, how do we ensure that if I were to order something online, I don't say you come and I'll give you the money, but we'll conclude everything online, and all you have to do is just to deliver it to me?
One benefit that we have in Ghana compared to say other countries is mobile money, right? Where I sit and what I see, a customer being able to get an instant refund, it's probably the most important thing. So if I buy something on, say, Jumia, and I pay with my mobile money, and I decide I don't like it anymore and I return it, and it's approved, I get my money instantly. If I buy something on Jumia Food and I change my mind, you're delaying delivery and it gets cancelled, I get my money back instantly. Now think about a scenario somebody wants to buy, and these is all like real life scenarios. On Jumia Food, you can buy something for say 15 cedis, right? And that's for lunch. So you decided that you want to buy lunch. You go on the app, you choose curry and beans, you order it, 15 cedis. Maybe you have only about 50 cedis in your account, right? And this is actually a realistic scenario. And then it gets cancelled. But let's say you paid with your card, right? If it's not instant refund, right, and it gets cancelled or the vendor couldn't deliver, now you're telling me that I should use more money for my 50 cedis that I have to place another order, right? So if you cannot be deliberate about giving better customer service, saying, okay, we think that we can give you this order, even though we've sent a refund to you, we cannot call it back. But if it's mobile money, the money goes back immediately into your account and you can use it to place another order. And obviously, there are no fees attached to it. You get your full refund. If a customer has to use more money to pay for the item, they tend to kind of not want to do it. So next time they place an order, it's like, no. I just do cash on delivery. If I do cash on delivery, I don't have to worry about it being cancelled, the order not being delivered on time. Me wanting to cancel because I've changed my mind. And so these are some of the trust issues that we need to solve. We need to be deliberate about giving the best customer service. So for instance, on Jumia, if somebody pays on a card, right, and it gets cancelled on some of the, like if it's food or something like that, we would refund into the account that they have. Now, Then you also have to start worrying about, do you have a license to hold money in the wallet? It's a bit of a gray area. So we need to be deliberate with how we implement these systems. And we also need a regulator to kind of help us have some clarity on some of these things that might sit in a gray area. It's okay if you're a small entity doing food delivery, you can get away with it. If you're a big entity, suddenly you have to look over your shoulders, like, are they going to come for me? So this is just one example that I can give about how we can be deliberate about it.
Okay, I'll get back to you on the gray areas and how we can deal with all the gray areas. But let me come to William Owusu-Demitia, because in talking about all of these things, once you hear the revenue aspects and the fact that we can get some money if we're to do things properly. And so he'll be telling us more about the creative revenue generation opportunities of e-service, which would serve as a solution to some of the challenges we're facing in the economy. William, what are the opportunities available to us in generating revenue through e-service?
Thank you very much, Winston, for the opportunity. Good morning. Two things plague our ability to generate enough revenue in this part of the world. One, our problem to identify taxpayers, and two, our ability to track their income to find out whether they are fulfilling their tax obligations. Quite on the contrary, I believe e-commerce provides us a perfect solution to address that. Why do I say this? Today, in the comfort of your home, you can go on any ride-sharing app, Uber, Yango, Bolt, and order that somebody picks you up to a certain place. For you to be able to do that, you must register with the app. For a driver to be certified to drive you, that person must be registered with that app. If you want any item purchased, probably food, you can go on any app, Jumia, Glovo, Bolt, and again, register. And whoever is the vendor who is selling the item is also registered. What we have seen here is data is being generated. And so the issue of identifying a taxpayer, if the person is operating on an e-commerce platform, is largely addressed. The biggest problem is what do we do with the data? And how are policies and revenue authorities liaising with these data aggregators to get the information? We could add another layer of the requirements for registration as a vendor or as a person providing a service through what? Through a ride-sharing app. Add your TIN. Add your taxpayer identification number. In the same way that if I pay for a ride or if I pay for food that is delivered over an app, I get an instant receipt acknowledging how much money I purchased or how much I paid and the food I ordered and the vendor I ordered from. That information can go to GRA seamlessly. If there's a taxpayer identification number attached to that, there's an opportunity for GRA to track the income the vendor is making or the income the driver is making. So as the system begins to formalize and we generate data, our biggest problem is how do we mine the data and find out whether people are fulfilling their tax obligations. I'll go a step further. Whenever there are payments made over these platforms, the aggregators are the ones who hold it and pay it over to the vendor if the vendor is to fulfill the part of the bargain. Our laws on withholding tax needs to be looked at again. Under the law, it is only a person who makes a payment. That person has the withholding obligation if certain thresholds are satisfied. In other jurisdictions, withholding agents include anybody who has custody of the money. In this case, you could have the data aggregator whose app is being used, who is able to bridge the customer and the service provider being a withholding agent. for the appropriate taxes to be deducted at source and paid. Now, if we are using the data very well, because as at now, GRA has digitalized, they've gone online. We are looking at a taxpayers portal where I can sit here, and I think before the show I was showing Westing that you can go on the taxpayer portal and you can tell your tax office, your assigned tax office, even on the taxpayers portal, how many of these service providers, vendors who are on these platforms have assigned tax offices. Whenever we think of e-commerce, we think of it in the broader sense, the Amazons of this world, the eBays of this world, the Googles of this world. That's far-fetched. Because before we can even agree on whether to tax the income they are getting from this country, there has to be a global forum of agreement, because they don't just have services in Ghana. Pillar 1, Pillar 2 are still in the discussion stages. Let's concentrate on homegrown solutions where we have the data available to us. People tell us, the bloggers and the rest tell us, oh, I have a YouTube channel. I'm paid so much every month. Why are we not linking up with YouTube to ask them, provide us data on the people earning income from your channel every month? And GRA have a dedicated unit to track the income. We have wonderful laws in this country on tax. The Commissioner General is even empowered to even write to you and ask you to file a return irrespective of a particular event under the preemptive assessment under the Revenue Administration Act. Why are we not making use of it? We have heard information about the fact that now GRA has a portal for non-resident persons to register and charge VAT. That is indirect tax. It is the consumer that pays. So if today I'm accessing a Google platform service, I'm expected that the non-resident, because the person has met the threshold, must charge me VAT, something of that sort, Netflix and all that. That's good. But what about the income the food vendor is making? If we couldn't identify the person on the street selling, today, if the person is selling over an app, at least we can identify the person. If not for anything, the rider who picks up the food can identify where the shop is. What are we doing with that data? So it is important that we understand that in this era of technology, it may have its own issues, but it's a blessing for us. If we would implement the modified taxation system, I recommend the first place we should pilot it is with vendors on these apps. If we are able to pilot it because we have the data and we are able to do it well, then we can move on to the brick and mortar system where we are looking for fiscal locations as opposed to patterns where data is generated. I believe this is something that we can easily do. In the 2022 budget, if you look at the estimated PAYE that we are hoping to get, it's about 12 billion. Self-employed persons, who are those we cry about all the time, we are estimated to take about 1 billion from them, but they are the majority of taxpayers. The question is why? It's all about identifying taxpayers and tracking their income. Thank God for advancement in technology. These two issues can easily be addressed. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, William. So let's identify them and track their earnings. You've talked about, you ended with the informal sector. And there are lots of people within the informal sector. We have talked about a lot of things. I remember the 2018 budget, we toyed with this whole idea of having mobile money users register with their tax identification number so we can monitor what they do and in the end be able to get some money from their earnings. Let's break it down. So that informal person who's selling, you go there, exchange, get the product, pay for it. How do you get that person? How do you track that person's earnings to be able to contribute income to the states?
Thank you very much, Winston. The difficulty has always been identifying that person who is selling. And I tell people that when you deal in cash transactions, it's very difficult to be able to tell. So we walk to the market. We buy 3 tubers of yam. I don't know the going rate now. Let's say it's 20 cedis. And I give the person cash. I take the tubers of yam, I walk away. How can the revenue tell that this person received 20 Ghana cedis from William? However, if the person is registered with a payment system. And over here, we need to be able to segregate the two, whether the person is a merchant or it's a normal SIM the person has that the person is receiving payment. If the person is registered and the person receives payment digitally, it leaves a trail. The difficulty is, one, identifying that that person is actually selling the item for which the person is receiving payments. Because it could be anybody transferring money over the platform. And there are series of transactions that are generated every single day. That is why it is inherently difficult to use that alone as a basis to tax them. That's why I said that. For those who are using e-commerce, where I don't walk to a physical place, but I use an app, as we define e-commerce, purchase and sale of goods and services over computer-like networks where you can place orders and receive orders. Whenever there is that app, whenever e-commerce comes into the picture, information generated is key. Because if you look at the content of the receipt, the vendor is identified and the amount that is paid is also known. That becomes easy. That at that point you can tell, oh, vendor A sold Wache to William on this day and earned 10 cedis. So vendor A, we expect that at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter, as we do it, you must do what? You must honor your tax obligations. And mind you, we are seeing your orders online. The difficulty with offline would always be with us. That we cannot run away from. And every system has that difficulty. But as the discussion goes on e-commerce provides us a good platform, at least to generate information that we can, as a first step, use to be able to, as it were, assess the person and find out whether the person is fulfilling tax obligations. So offline, purely offline transactions, we have an inherent difficulty. But where you have an element of it being online and data is generated, we have the opportunity to go a step further and find out whether tax obligations are being.
So with that, and finally, with that difficulty that we have, how do we solve it going forward to ensure that a lot more people would be able to contribute to revenue generation?
Thank you very much, Winston. Our biggest opportunity is advancement in technology and encouraging such digital platforms for sale and purchase of items. That is our biggest leverage, if you ask me. If we can encourage people to do that, and it must be, as the speakers have said, there must be an aggressive, targeted policy direction aimed at people being comfortable in doing what? In using digital channels for their transactions. COVID taught us that you can do that. Now, after COVID, the question is, what policies have we rolled out to, as it were, advance the course towards being people being comfortable in terms of patronizing digital platforms? Let's not talk about controversial issues here, but we need to be able to have policies that are able to encourage persons to use digital platforms, and so that we can generate the data and go ahead and tax them. That would be what I'll say for now.
Great. I mean, when you talked about controversial issues, it reminded me that I'm a journalist too. What controversial issues are you referring to?
So in terms of digital payment platforms, it comes up with issues such as whether tax measures should be, as it were, imposed on transactions that take place over digital platforms, such as what has been mooted, the e-levy. And so the question is, are we able to encourage people to use such platforms when there is a tax handle that may impact them using it? For me, it is always a trade-off. Tax policy is a trade-off. Are we looking at revenue in the short term, or we are looking at revenue in the medium to long term? How do we get the majority of Ghanaians to pay or honor their income tax obligations? Choose my words carefully, income tax obligations. It is only when the policies give people comfort that these channels are good. So we can implement the e-levy in another way that does not distort the manner in which these channels are being done. And that, I believe, is the conversation that is being done around the policy table. We believe that in the end, even if there will be some form of transactional value tax, it would be done in a manner that does not impede the progress of using mobile payment systems for persons who want to, as it were, use digital channels to either sell or purchase items.
Thank you very much, William. When you were ending, it reminded me of something you said some months ago, but I would come back to you on that, on what you make of, expanding the tax net and how we should resort to income taxes, direct taxes, and not always resorting to indirect taxes. But I don't want this to be a conversation about e-levy. So let me, get to you, Francis, up here. And it's important at this point, we look at the impact of e-service on economic growth and business. That's very important. We've talked about quality of life. Of course, I'll come back to Fred about the gray area. We've talked about how we can raise revenue. But even as, William was talking about revenue generation, you could see certain impacts on businesses. What are these impacts on businesses, and what will be its impact on economic growth?
Thank you very much, Winston, and thank you for inviting us to this panel. Distinguished ladies and
please,
gentlemen.
I didn't invite you. Graphic and Stanbic Bank did.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Chairperson, MD of Graphic, I think before I dive into the impact on growth and business, from a rudimentary point of view, I think what William and Fred are talking about is essentially expanding the digital footprint of the Ghanaian. Because if you can expand the digital footprint of a Ghanaian, it's like leaving a trail of electronic breadcrumbs. And then the necessary providers, institutions, policymakers can then collect those breadcrumbs. Those breadcrumbs is the information, right? Our transactions, our behavior online. Analyze that data and then use that data to further what I believe is the consensus agreement, which is growth, which means a better quality of life for everyone, right? So if we pull back and then we talk about the impact on growth and business, I will start from first principles, and I hope I don't embarrass my economics professor, but we were taught that there are multiple measures of growth, and some can debate ad infinitum on which measure of growth is better, but for the purposes of our conversation and time, because I think we're all going to go to work after this, let's agree that we will use GDP as our measure of growth. The things that improve or create growth or increase your GDP have not changed, right? They have not changed since we all started learning about this stuff. I think that the catalyst for this conversation is that one of the factors that impacts positively on growth, if it is harnessed correctly, and actually negatively impacts or shrinks economies if it is not handled correctly, is how you manage technology and innovation. Now, the study of economics is based on how you use what is scarce or what is not infinitely available to improve your life, right? Fundamentally. And so if we look at what drives growth, you have a highly skilled labor force, you have an aggregate increase in consumer spending, government spending, you have an increase in the amount of goods and services that are available, right? And the things that can drive that kind of productivity are technology, and as a synonym for technology, innovation. Because innovation improves productivity, and productivity drives growth. Now, over the last decade, I think there's been a research piece by Google and the IFC, and the IFC is the private investment arm of the World Bank Group. The African continent, on aggregate, has grown at 4% over the last decade. Most of Europe and Asia is about 1.7%. North America, South America, in the low one, like about 1%, 1.2%. And this has largely been driven by the advent of mobile. Now, mobile is technology and innovation. And the reason that we have accelerated so much is because, let's be honest, we talked about the pillars of industrialization. As a continent, we missed most of, we missed first, second, and third. There is a debate about whether we are really in the fourth industrial revolution or whether it's already happened. But we have a unique opportunity to harness the different platforms that make up this, fourth industrial revolution to impact positively on business and on growth. Now we see that here in Ghana, now everybody wants to create an app. Everybody wants to be digital because the buzz thing is that our population, which is increasingly urbanized and incredibly young relative to the rest of the population of the world, is mostly digital native. And by digital native, it means a lot of their life is lived through mediums that are digital. Social, commerce, education, health, right? But it's one thing to create an app and then, pat yourself on the back and say, I am now digital. And it's another thing to create an end-to-end experience that really lives the spirit of what digital is meant to be. And our chairperson alluded to that, which is customer experience. We have not done the best job at focusing on how we bring along our population through customer experience. The platforms are available, the technologies are available. Increasingly, the skill sets are available locally. We have incredible engineers, incredible business people, incredible innovators. But the fundamental thing, and Fred alluded to this, changing behavior, changing minds, is about experience. So people's fear about fraud, people's trust in a service. I mean, when you, for a lot of us here, we swipe our Visa cards without a second thought. But we forget that Visa Inc. as a company, as a payment rails network, has built a reputation over a long period of time that gives you that trust where you implicitly use the service without even a second thought. And that, I believe, from my experience and a bit of my history, I had operations at ExpressPay. ExpressPay is a payment service provider in Ghana. We like to say we were the first to allow people to pay for the internet on the internet. And a guiding light for us is the user and customer experience. Because it doesn't matter how smart, how intelligent, how wonderful your product is, and they should be all those things because it forms part of impacting positively on growth and business. But if you do that at the expense of the customer, then you end up having a shiny, wonderful product that is hardly ever used. And you can see that across both private and public, right? We are on this massive and aggressive digitalization or digitization drive. And we are trying to create the foundational platforms that will accelerate and impact businesses positively. Good addressing systems. That is excellent for companies like Jumia because it makes your last mile logistics way better. It improves the trust, right? Like Fred said, it's incredibly frustrating when you order something and the rider has to call you 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times before he gets to you. If you're in a meeting, that's it, you're done. You're not getting your product. Oh, boss, I call you, sir, you know pick, so I take go warehouse. We've all had those experiences, right? So a digital addressing system kind of resolves stuff like that. Companies like ExpressPay, where our bread and butter, our air is payments, and making sure that the payments experience is one that we are proud of and one that meets the needs of every consumer, and gives options, like our chairperson said. So making sure that it doesn't matter where someone's money is, as long as it is electronic. We can talk about how we convert the cash to electronic on a different platform. That's a topic on its own. But making sure that wherever someone's source of income is, they are able to take that and use that to fulfill the purchase of a good or for the payment of a service, right? So things like, even from a public sphere, if you go to a hospital, you should be able to either use a POS, scan a QR, have the hospital listed as a merchant on a platform like ExpressPay or in your Momo, somewhere where you can easily and comfortably feel secure that you are able to interact with a service provider, right? So I think when we focus on the consumer and we focus on providing and delivering wonderful experiences for the consumer, whether we are in the private sphere or the public sphere, then by that very nature, you will increase the production of goods and services, you will increase the purchase of goods and services, and by that, you will impact growth, right? So as businesses, I think in as much as we are beginning to come around to the focus of digital, we must also take that and not forget the rudiments of business and selling, and that is to know your customer and create products that take your customer along.
Great. So let me find out from you how we can use e-service to enhance public service delivery, which would in turn impact positively on businesses.
So every business wants to know who their customers are. Every business wants to know that when there is commerce, the goods or the services are going to who they are meant to go to, and the payment for those goods or services are also going to who they are meant to go to. And so if we bring that to the public sphere, you can think of E in all manner of places, right? The consumer, who are we the populace, will interact with government across various touch points, right? When your child is born, they must be registered. When, unfortunately, you lose a relative or a friend, it must be registered. When you need a passport, you need to apply for it. You need to pay for it. You need to fill a form. You need to have certain pieces of data that are important as a country for them to know who you are, validate, all that stuff before they give you a passport. Driver's license, voter's ID, all of that stuff. All of those things can form what I was saying was the digital footprint. And so in creating services, it's not a matter of saying, now you can go on the internet and that's it, right? And Fred alluded to this. It's one thing to say passports are now digital, and then another thing to force the person to have to find a bank branch to go and buy a form, fill the form, submit the form in person before they go to the passport office and then get the passport. Luckily today, because of initiatives like Ghana.gov, things like that are being addressed, right? So today on Ghana.gov, and I just got my passport, I have a digital identity on Ghana.gov. They know everything about me. I filled the form online. I made the payment online. And I got my appointment date, time. I was able to choose it, all of that stuff online. Got there on the day. In fact, unfortunately, I was ill, and so I missed my appointment date. And the beauty about it was, after the appointment date had expired, I got a new email with a new appointment date. And I just showed up. They had all my data, they knew who I was, they gave me a ticket number, and that was it. No, the olden days, and I remember because I had a passport before Ghana.gov existed. And those days where you would line up at the passport office near Foreign Affairs, and you would wait from 4 or 3 in the morning, and then just before the gatesman will close the gate and say, boss, we've taken 150 people for the day, so you try again tomorrow. Not come on this date, but try. So by the mere fact that they are saying try, it means it's not a given that you will receive the service, right? So pushing those things into digital is very difficult because you're dealing with human beings, and human beings are averse to certain types of inertia, change, right? Especially when some of those human beings have been extracting rents from the inefficiencies for so long. And it's just how it is, right? So creating digital experiences, especially focusing on the usefulness to the consumer. Because remember I said I missed my first appointment. And I was worried because I was figuring out, who am I now going to call to say, oh, boss, I wasn't able to, for the person to be like, oh, show some love and we'll get you another date. But that didn't happen, right? Because through Ghana.gov, that scenario had been thought of. And we have, kind of created a process to address that scenario. So doing things like that, I believe it's a very, Ghana.gov presents an incredibly powerful tool to create digital identities for our people, to create a more productive, efficient way of people to interact with government services, to increase revenue generation, and also to improve to the very last person the ability for government to communicate on those services that are available with their populace. So I think it's something that it's not without its challenges, but nothing is without its challenges, private or public. And it's only through its continuous use that you will have iterative updates, upgrades, and improvements on the service.
Thank you very, very much, Francis. At least you didn't have to show love.
Yeah, I didn't have to show love.
That's very important. Well, it's now time for all of you gathered here with us. If anybody has a question or a contribution, it's time for you. Just show by hand. We'll get a microphone to you, and then you'd be able to ask that question or make that contribution. All right, so let's get a microphone. Yes, I see one at the back. Yes, and then we'll come in front. Everybody, we're giving a chance to speak. Yes. You tell us your name, the institution where you're coming from, and then you go ahead with your contribution or question.
Thank you very much. My name is Eric Amponza-Boatin. I'm a tax consultant. We all know that you don't apply the tax on revenue. I'm saying so because I have to do the tax adjustments for my clients before I'll be able to determine the income that we have to apply the tax. And so I have a bit of an issue if you say that if somebody buys something online and the money that the person is actually paying, you are saying that you are going to put a tax on it. My issue is, how will you be able to match the revenue with the expenditure? Because we all know that that is very important. So how are you going to address that? The other issue is that's for my friend in the middle. Yes. If we are trying to rake in all the revenue, and then you are telling us that at a point you have to make the payment offline. My friend at the GRE, who is here with me, he is in charge of the online thing. I think he should be talking to you because, you see, we want to rake in the revenue. So once you go offline, like William said, how do we track it? The other issue, my last point, I have a lot, but let me just leave it. If you look at our law, Section 105, it talks about income being sourced in what? Ghana. And we all know the Jumias, the Amazons, these are bodies that are not in Ghana. But if you read the H, it tells you that that income is being sourced from Ghana. So how will the GRA be able to track and also get the needed revenue for our growth? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's get to the next person. I saw a hand back there. Okay, just by Mr. Amponsa's Yes, adjacent. Yes, we can get that person to ask the question.
Thank you. My name is Edmond. Mine has to do with the dispatch agents that we've been using. From the first presentation by the chairperson, we got to know that some of these agents, the dispatch guys, their service delivery is very poor. Their critical role in our services is important. Is there any training that those of you who are in like the Jomans and other things and the booth, you've been organizing for them so that they'll be able to provide that service to their customers? Because there are instances friends of mine have told me they brought some food to them and a part of the meat is taken away, and when you ask them, say that's why it was packaged for them. All these things affect the quality of service delivery. So I would like to know whether some of these things is being ordained for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edmund. I saw a hand at the back. Yes. Yes. Let's get to the person at the back. Yes.
My name is Alberta with Metro TV. I want to find out from William, and with the e-services, how do we ensure, in the first place, we don't overburden the consumer? Because if they have to tax the vendor, at the end, they pass on the cost to the consumer again. Also, how do we ensure that we don't overburden the poor, like we always say? There are a lot of the tax net in terms of spreading it so that others can also be taxed. In doing that, you will end up taxing people who are getting very small income. So how do we ensure that everybody is taxed, but we don't overburden a section of people? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Any question? Okay, I think there's a hand here. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Samuel. When I listened to the chairperson, and I think you also made a point there about people starting transactions online but concluding them offline, I think I'm the perfect example. You know, but there's a reason why, and it is linked to what I think we need to do to change that. So I would typically go online to various credible shops in Ghana, look at items, look at the prices, look at everything. But when I finish, I look for where the location is so I can go there to buy my item. And sometimes I have to go through hustle, traffic and everything to get there. But I'm the same person who would also sit behind the PC, go to not so popular shops outside Ghana, shop and get them delivered and paid for. Now, the reason why I would do that there but not do this one is, what I keep thinking every time is that in case I have an issue, who will I talk to? Who will listen to me? Is there somebody who will listen to me? So even if I am sure that I'll get a refund, even if my refund will take a week, that is fine. All I need is, can I get somebody I can talk to? You understand it? A couple of times you've called customer service, and a few times I've done that before where I decided, look, before I conclude this transaction, let me call the customer service and see, just in case. And sometimes you call the customer service, nobody answers, or the person who answers has no clue what you're talking about and everything. And so I'm like, look, hang on. I would prefer to go through the traffic and the hassle to go to the shop and finish my transaction. So what I think we need to do is, let us strengthen the communication to the consumer that, look, if you have an issue, call this number. If you have an issue, you will be heard. If you have an issue, somebody would listen to you. And I was so happy. I had a deal. I did a transaction through ExpressPay, you know, and it was fantastic. I mean, I tried once, it worked. The next time, it did not work. While I was just logging up, the next second, I had an email which said, look, we realized you are having this issue. Please call this number. And I was like, wow. You understand? And if I have to do another transaction, I will do it with them. You understand? So let us strengthen that aspect of it, because the market potential is huge. So if we strengthen it and people are sure that they will get heard, I'm sure that we'll be able to break that barrier and do a lot more business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samuel. So let's get the questions addressed. And William, it looks like a lot of the questions are to you. How do we ensure that we don't burden the consumer? How do we ensure that, for instance, we don't confuse the revenue with, and keep taxing people's revenue? How do we balance the revenue and the expenditure, then to know at the end of it all the profit that that particular firm is making and taxing it? Yes.
Thank you very much. I think it's what I proposed was us to look at our withholding tax laws again. And withholding tax is applied on the gross amount. So as for that one, it's not in doubt. If you make payments beyond a certain threshold, I didn't say a final tax. A withholding tax, in most often than not, for payment of goods, works, and services are payments on account. It simply means that a portion of the money you are entitled to is withheld and paid over to the revenue, pending your final, as it were, filing of your return to determine your income and expenditure lines. So that was what I proposed, that we should look at our withholding tax element again. I didn't talk about the final tax. Now, again, on that point, what we are looking at in terms of people using e-commerce really are not the big players where you would have them do a lot of, as it were, high-value transactions. And so these people can conveniently fit under the modified taxation system. And that's why I said that we can try using that as a platform to pilot it. So we see the difficulties inherent in that before we go full scale to those who are fiscally located. So my proposals were look at a withholding tax. Even if you are not looking at a withholding tax, because data is generated as to how much the person is receiving, it is important that we follow up on that and find out whether indeed they are filing their returns. Because revenue determines, to a large extent, if you match revenue or expenditure against revenue, that's when you get your taxable profits, as is where on which tax will be imposed. One thing we always see in this country is people suppressing revenue or inflating cost. Two ways. So if you are able to track the person's income or revenue line, for cost, the person must verify, must bring verifiable proof that the person incurred this amount of cost. And so it should be able for us to give us the inkling to be able to tackle that. So those are my thoughts on that. On the issue of payments that have a source in Ghana, Section 105 of the Income Tax Act 2015, Act 896, agreed. But the withholding tax obligation under Section 116, subsection 10 of Act 896 is on the person paying for the goods or service. And most often than not, if I am paying for something, I cannot withhold tax on the payment I'm making to, say, the Amazons of this world or the Googles of this world for a particular item. It wouldn't match up to the cost of it. So that is the difficulty using a withholding tax approach when it's applied on a non-resident global company. And so often, the approach is rather to use what we call a permanent establishment approach. And that is difficult because they operate in different countries. They have servers located somewhere and they provide the service or the item in a particular country. So the global forum or the global consensus is that we are going to look at digital presence. And that's why I talked about Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. There's a global consensus towards seeing how we get these giants, e-commerce giants, to be able to pay tax in countries where they receive payment. That is where the thought is, because it's difficult, one, to tell people to withhold tax on payments to them, and two, it's difficult to go alone in trying to tax them on the income, because most often than not, you don't even have the data. If I sit here and I purchase something on Amazon, my Amazon app on my phone, how would GRA know that I purchased something on them? Unless Amazon itself is able to reveal to us. And that is why it needs to have a global forum to deal with that. On the issue of burden sharing in tax revenue and whether applying the tax will not be passed over, usually for indirect taxes like VAT and the rest, they are passed over. So what I heard about GRA's launch was that they provided a platform such that any person under Section 16 of the Value Added Tax Act 2013 at 870, any non-resident person who provides electronic commerce services other than through a registered VAT agent in Ghana is supposed to register and charge VAT. Now, that had not been done, and that platform is created so that they can have agents being able to register and file online. That is VAT that we are looking at. But in terms of the revenue itself, because remember, the item is 50 cedis on which there's VAT and levies imposed. That 50 cedis item or amount are paid to the person. It is income in the person's hands. how do we get the person to, as it were, pay his fair share? One, you can use a withholding tax concept to receive some portion of that income upfront and tell the person to file a return at the end of the basis period, that is the accounting period, or the individual 31st December by the last day of April the ensuing year, and pay the tax. Or you could look at a system where you tell the person that, hey, you are supposed to file and pay taxes on quarterly basis. These are options from the basket of taxing ideas to choose from. I think a withholding tax regime that is not too punitive, say a 1% or something, at least gives us some revenue upfront. And then we can look at matching that, or a modified tax system based on that. I think on the issue of taxes, I want to believe I'll be able to address them. So what we can look at for the e-commerce business is looking at what we call the tax stamp business, where under the income tax regulations, there are stipulated amounts that certain categories of persons must pay every quarter. And that one applies a lot to the informal sector. So those in the butchery, the drivers and all that, they are itemized if you look at the income tax regulations and how much they are supposed to pay every quarter. The e-commerce platform gives us an opportunity to be able to, one, identify those people and find out and match it. Are they paying these quarterly amounts? If they are not, can we generate a system to ensure that they actually pay? And if they don't pay, what are the enforcement mechanisms? Because the data aggregator has custody of the money temporarily, can the Commissioner General under Section 60 of Act 915 say that that person is a third-party debtor? So if the person has a tax that he has not paid, the aggregator holding the money should pay over to GRA. These are all enforcement mechanisms. So around the policy table, we can think through, refine these ideas, and make them worth the while. But the important point is, e-commerce provides us an opportunity to get data. What we do with the data is up to us, and how we do it within the confines of our law to ensure that people fulfill their tax obligations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, William. Fred, Samuel ended by asking, whom do we talk to if we have a problem?
Okay, there's quite a lot to unpack here. So, okay, before I answer some of the questions, I want to maybe react a little bit to what was just said. So, in terms of how we can increase that tax net, keep in mind that everything that we're talking about here, we're still talking about that 5 to 15% as a percentage of all commerce, right? So earlier on, that comment that was made was how do we avoid overburdening a few? That's exactly what's going to happen. If you don't change it, you don't increase it so that a lot more people are doing e-commerce, then essentially all those things that you're putting in place, you're asking those people that are doing the 5 to 15% of e-commerce to pay all those taxes. And then the offline taxes is just, you've left it. Now, earlier on, I think the comment was made about the giant, how do we tax the giant, etc. And I feel like that's also not the way to go. Because if we focus heavily on those giants, if we focus on people shifting commerce to things like WhatsApp, right? What happens when what is going on in the world right now with sanctions, something like that happens, and they pull out? Then suddenly you have your e-commerce ecosystem that's built around a giant that is foreign to your country, essentially just shutting down all of your e-commerce, right? So what can we do to grow that e-commerce base in this country, right? That allows the average person to actually play in that ecosystem.
What can we do?
Okay, so I'm not kind of trying to solve all of e-commerce problems here, but I've just did a trip recently to Rwanda, right? And Rwanda, obviously, is a very small country. I know that Ghanaians like to kind of point out that they've gone through some hard times, and that's why things seem to work there. But one thing that I noticed was that, and this is actually a fairly recent development there, the motorbikes, the Okada that they have, right? They have meters on them. And you cannot, and all of it is done locally. So a local company has built it for the government so that when you take the Okada, the meter has to run. And you imagine that you take a taxi here and you don't have to hustle. And it's not Uber and it's not Bolt, but it's Ghanaian made. Which means that you don't have to chase Uber or Bolt to pay the taxes. It's the local person collecting the money, and the meter is running, and it's all sitting locally within Rwanda, right? If we can implement something like that, which works, which builds the trust, which means that the taxes that are collected is not spread on just a few people that have smartphones that are using Bolt or Uber, but on the larger population who are taking taxis everywhere, or Aboboya or whatever it is. If we could do something like that, we spread that tax, amongst everybody, because everybody before Uber came here, we took taxis sometimes,
Okay.
right, or trotros or whatever. And we can do the same thing here. That answers, I believe, the question around spreading that tax burden. The other one is on, this is a training for delivery agents. I can assure you that they undergo training. I think this could probably answer a couple of questions and the comment that you made. After every order that you would make on a Jumia, and I believe that almost all e-commerce platforms, you would get an email or some sort of SMS asking you to rate the delivery agent, okay? So even if you're not able to pick up the phone, and I think sometimes in our frustration and anger, we want to kind of pick up and yell at somebody. But I can tell you that if I allowed every customer, a potential customer, to call my phone lines, I will not be able to serve any of you. You'll be in a queue for 2 hours. So we put systems in place to allow you to kind of comment on how things went. And we separately have a team that if some agent is getting lots of low ratings, they will get pulled into a room, they will be retrained on what is done. You might even get a call. So these things actually are happening, and the idea is that if you, as a user, think, okay, I'm so upset about this, I don't want to have anything to do with the company, and you don't report it, then it allows that agent to do it and get away with it. And then they do it and keep on getting away with it, and nothing gets reported. So some of it is also that we need to consider that we are essentially that 10% of the population who are the trailblazers. If we don't try to improve the systems, it will not get better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Fred. Let me get to you, Francis, finally.
Well, I think, like Fred and William said, these are like good initial steps, but there's something else we can do, and I think William was alluding to it, but it didn't go all the way. In some jurisdictions, these the FANGs, like they like to call them, the Facebooks and Netflix and of this world, or let me not say Facebook, the Metas of this world. In some jurisdictions, all commerce that happens, they are necessarily meant to have a local payments aggregator manage the payments, right? And so then what happens in that instance is, one, you are creating a giant of your own locally that will pay you corporate tax. Two, your payments information, it doesn't matter if it sits somewhere else, that data is available locally for your locals as well. And so those are some of the things that we can do. And I think sometimes and this is not just a Ghanaian problem, it's not just an African problem, it's a small economy problem. You feel like you need that convenience for your population, you need that company in your country, it's a stamp of approval of your development and your progress more than you think that company needs you. But trust me, everybody needs everybody, right? And if other countries have been able to do that, then it's worth having that kind of conversation, right? Hitherto, the conversation about taxing large tech companies was almost taboo, but now every country, and it's not just cash-strapped African economies that are thinking through digital service taxes and sorts, but large global economies are also here saying, look, I can't continue to burden my local corporate population with corporate taxes and then have this large company that through some regulatory loopholes says, well, I do billions of dollars of business in your country, but per section 111 of this law, I don't have to pay you anything, but there are resources, there's investments, there's a lot of things that they take up in your country, and then they could also pay their fair share. But the other thing is maybe we always focus on tax, but another way to do it is to focus on investment, right? So you can flip it on its head and say, okay, you may not be paying your fair share, but I have a teeming population of youth who feel like they have nothing to do or no jobs or no opportunities. You could invest some of your services, like if you are a large logistics player, maybe a small regional hub in your country. And these things, it's competition. Recently, Google just landed its first fiber that's linking Portugal to Cape Town, serving Europe and Africa, and they linked their first landing site in Togo. That was not the initial plan. The landing site was meant for Nigeria, because Nigeria is one of the largest anchors of technology. So if you look at the African continent, you have South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and Egypt. They sort of anchor, tech in Africa. A lot, if you look at all the numbers, they churn out the most in terms of investment in their companies, output from a growth perspective. They have the largest population of engineers, tech specialists. Ghana is doing very well. If you look at the numbers for our size, I think we're punching above our weight, but we could do so much more. But the Togolese government hired a minister for digital economy and digital transformation. She was hired when she was in her 30s, I believe, and she got on the phone and said, look, there are so many landing sites in Nigeria. There are so many landing sites in Ghana. Right? Togo has no landing sites. We're trying to create this digital, improve this digital economy in our country, create the digital footprint, provide more services digitally to our population, and an internet connection that is going to be 20 times, apparently that's what the numbers are saying, 20 times more throughput than the existing fiber lines running through Africa would immensely transform our country. And guess what? They landed it in Togo, right? The first landing site was in Togo. So this competition that alludes to the fact that the way we are thinking right now, technology has sort of even democratized innovation to the point where you need to not only think about yourselves, but you need to think how you're positioning yourselves in a global economy to take advantage of some of these things, right? So things like customer experience, things like training, things like improving the belief that somebody's order will be fulfilled. We didn't really touch on this, but from a policy perspective, Ghana needs to do a better job on consumer rights protection. Right? I think that alludes to some of I start online and then I go and drive through traffic because the person knows that if he orders that television online and the television arrives at his house and the screen is cracked, unless you have some sort of familiar relationship with the person who brought that television, it's like, boss, I don't know what happened. That's it. Right? And then you will then go through a back and forth with the person who sold it. And maybe you get a replacement, maybe you get some of your money back, but it's not assured. But if people had the same way, banks and now payment service providers take consumer protection seriously because in addition to the fact that it's important for our business in a competitive environment, you also have a regulator who thinks that protecting the consumer is important, right? So if we are going full steam ahead on this digital economy thing, and we have no option but to, or be left in the dark ages. If we're going full steam ahead, then all the players, private, public, and the consumers need to be at the table. And things like consumer protection and consumer rights needs to be incredibly an important aspect of what we do. But then also believing in the ability of the innovators in your country. I do not know if we have a startup act in Ghana, but I've seen countries that have created a startup act. I know we have a lot of provisions that have been put into different laws that sort of allude to helping startups, but we need a cogent, clear policy on digital innovation and technology and on startups, because creating that innovation, again, is what is going to improve efficiency and improve productivity, and that will have a positive impact on growth.
Thank you very, very much. We can do better. Thank you, Francis Appiah. Thank you, William Owusu-Debitia. And a big thank you to you also, Fred Frimpong, for joining us. It's been a very insightful conversation. But unfortunately, our time is up, so this would bring us to the end of this program. Would invite the chairperson, Adoma Owusu, to give us her closing remarks with a round of applause.
Thank you, everyone. This was such an interesting and insightful conversation. I wrote about 5 pages of notes, and I know that we're out of time, so I'm going to have to try and summarize a couple of points. But so many salient points raised by our esteemed panelists, and also the questions that were raised were also really, really interesting. But here's some of the big takeouts that I took from this conversation. The first one from Fred is around the fact that we consider the e-commerce economy to be big, but it's actually not. It's only about 5 to 10%, perhaps at the most 15% of general commerce. And it's down to the small few, like you and I here, who have smartphones, who have good internet penetration, but we need more in order to be able to scale this for the rest of the populace. And some of the ways to be able to do so is to ensure that the digital address system works, to ensure that we have a robust refund policy, and there's a Customer Protection Act that works for the people. These are all very, very important. Now, William raised some really, really interesting points around the tax and the revenue aspects around e-commerce. And some of the things that he said are, in effect, there are 2 things that one needs to know. One is how to identify the taxpayers, and 2, how to track the income. And his point is the fact that data aggregators or kind of third-party aggregators have this information. And so how can they partner with the revenue authorities in order to be able to mine this data and also tax at source? So he mentioned some really, really interesting and insightful ways to try and do so. Add the TIN, be able to identify the people, look at the apps. And I think that these are really relevant and ways to try and do this, which are very feasible. Now, Francis made some very, very interesting points as well around the impact of e-commerce on growth and quality of life. He used GDP as a measure of growth, and he mentioned that on the continent of Africa, we have grown in terms of GDP perspective by 4% compared to Europe of about 1% or so. And the main way that this is being driven is through technology and innovation. And so the whole thing as well is that what can we do to make sure that we spread this? And he said good customer experience is very, very, very key to this. Coupled with what Fred had said as well, they want a good addressing system, making sure that you get to the last mile, improving the customer experience and the payment experience as well. And then in terms of how we can get access to government or how governments can play in the space, he mentioned guardian.gov, and the example that he cited is something that I've experienced myself in terms of getting a passport. Okay, my passport had expired and it was a seamless process. I paid for it online, I had a date to go to the passport center, went there, got my ticket, and within a couple of weeks I had my passport. Seamless experience, and as he mentioned as well, it's a way for government to be able to provide its services to the populace and also be able to communicate with the populace. And then the questions, there were some really interesting ones, but I think the one that stands out for me is Simon. And Simon echoes all that what we've been saying around offline versus online, because we really don't trust the system. And so what we need to do is to ensure that we have great customer protection and also make sure that there is great fulfillment and back-end operations, So Francis mentioned Express Pay, and I've experienced it as well. I mean, I use Express Pay a lot. And I remember there's a case where I paid an entity which, I don't know, something had happened with the payments, and they refunded it back onto my card, and I was able to make payments through that. But I think at the core of it all, and we didn't mention this, and I think it's something that is of consideration, is really around what are the data protection elements around all of this? So you're talking about access to data, etc. But what does the Data Protection Act speak to about this? What does it say? And I think these are some of the comments that, or some of the some of the interventions where policy needs to be able to guide us around what is required from a tax data protection perspective. So to sum up, I want to thank everybody for being here, for engaging in this conversation. I think it is a very important one, a very powerful one. And as we look at ways of generating revenues for this country, e-commerce is definitely a way to do so, but we need to be able to widen and broaden the people that are utilizing e-commerce platforms and how we can work together in order to be able to ensure that the operational inefficiencies are addressed, more people are comfortable with using it, and the elements such as the digital address system, fulfillment, etc. are addressed, and so that we don't have people, dispatch riders, that are taking pieces of your meat when you order it. With that, I thank you very much, and I thank the Graphic and Stanbic.
Thank you very, very much, Adoma Owusu, for summing it up for us. But just before we wrap it up, let me say that the Ghana Yearbook 2022 edition is available now. This is from Graphic Communications Group Limited. And it's costing 150 Ghana cedis only. You can get it at all Graphic offices. And so make sure you get the Ghana Yearbook 2022. That'll be all from us. My name is Winston Amwa. Thank you so much for engaging in this insightful conversation. Well, the conversation would continue, of course, tomorrow on the Super Morning Show, which I host. We would continue with the conversation. Catch you. Have a lovely day.
Digital, with more businesses taking advantage of technology to reach more customers and to serve them better. Backed by a burgeoning fintech ecosystem, new opportunities are emerging by the day. With the trend comes the challenges. Ahead of the Graphic Business Stanbic Bank Breakfast Forum on electronic services and economic growth, we sampled the views of the public on how e-services are impacting their lives.
E-services, as we all know, is a very laudable thing where payments can be made instantly, and then it's also faster. Besides that, payments made convenient where probably I can sit in my comfort area and make payments. There's also this easy way of doing it. I must say that it's quite okay. Confirming payments made can easily be made on phones and other things. Previously, one has to call the bank or go to the bank to find out whether such deposit has been made. But with the e-services or with the electronic payments, I think it's okay.
The e-services in general, they have been of a huge benefit to us because in this market, for instance, the Abosokan market here, we used to have some challenges. We have some middlemen here who make it sometimes difficult for us shop owners to reach customers directly. They meet the customer and they say all sorts of things. So the electronic platform gave us another way to reach the customers ourselves. So for instance, through Facebook advertising, through WhatsApp, business and others, we reach the customers as they contact us. And then through dispatch, we serve them and they pay us through mobile money.
Scanner first no kura a comfort meji. Say so the only two phones wa omuntu meji. U phone yira kura no kwa MTN na. U sabeka usika. It is said that so ne baby a wonam bia wunya say so wuyi de to ade no. Utimi de eyi e de to ade ehia.
Maybe opesa transfers ka. You are working from here to it saves time. And it helps you not to stress yourself too much. You just send it through your phone and then you help yourself.
E-service is good though because some of our customers are not here. We tend to send the goods to them, then they momo it to us. So in order to be safe about how we are going to transact, so the e-service has come to help really much because we get the money straight on our phone, then we give the goods to the delivery So the transaction has become very easy comparing to the cash transactions. Because some of the cash transactions, some of us, we don't trust. It's not that we don't trust, but the people we send to deliver goods, we don't know them. So if we transact with the customer pays us the money like Momo, then we send the goods through them. So the e-transaction is very good.
E-services, electronic system, they feel say a bois, my business, no, a coso. The bit is say, Kametuya duty, Krana, was saying Kamefaka, a cotema, no Makwako agent, Makwaku, but me feel say e-services